live. So do I say my name? Larry Kearns, Kearns. I'm an architect. For the last 32 years, I've been a principal of Wheeler Kearns Architects here in Chicago.
My name's Beth Krieger. I'm the director of the IJ Clinic on Entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago Law School.
My name is Byron Sigcho Lopez, and I'm the alderman of the 25th Ward.
My name is Graham Grady. I am an attorney.
So my name is Catherine Dardenstadt. I am an architect at Layton Design, which is my own firm.
My name is Stephen Vance. I am an urban planner and I work for a company called Morrison Architectural Planning Strategies, or MAPS.
My name is Marcos Raya. I've been a full-time painter all my life.
Me llamo Rebeca Fernández. Actualmente trabajo en Mujeres Latinas en Acción. Ahí mi rol es, estoy en el departamento de empresarios del futuro.
What I love about Chicago is the diversity of the people. I love our architecture, I love our lakefront, I love our history, I love sort of our mid-placement in the country. There are a lot of things I like about it. Family.
I love Chicago for its focus on architecture. It is a city, a major U.S. city, where the average citizen has Chicago's architecture on their radar.
I like it that it's taking us into the future all this time.
Bueno, desde que llegué a Chicago, bueno, de empezar no sabía nada de Chicago cuando decidí venir a Chicago. Simplemente sabía yo por la historia en arquitectura que llevaba en la escuela que era una ciudad con mucha influencia europea y que era una ciudad con transporte colectivo, una ciudad urbana accesible desde mi punto de vista. Llegué aquí sin saber nada más que eso y me enamoré. Me enamoré de su arquitectura, me enamoré de la facilidad de interactuar en diferentes partes de la ciudad sin tener que manejar, que yo vengo de la Ciudad de México y tú sabes, ahí se pierde mucho tiempo manejando, mucho tiempo de tu vida. Entonces lo que más me gustó de Chicago es que yo podía tener calidad de vida en una ciudad de esta envergadura y cosmopolita.
What do I love about Chicago? That's a hard question to answer. It's so beautiful. I was raised to believe it's beautiful, so I'm not sure if how objective that is.
So even though we're diverse, we're highly segregated. Blacks live here, Latinx live here, white people live here, rich people live there, poor people live there. So it's this sort of strange mix in which we really don't mix.
Neglect and contradiction. I went to school at IIT, and right across the street was Robert Taylor Homes. So that 35th Street divide of being able to talk about a utopian architectural design in a Misesian democratic building, and then see across the street blocks of people's homes and lives being torn down, and we're not talking about it.
The big money politics is a big problem. So developers still have a big into, corporations still, so they are defining the policies and the pace and the change that we want to see, which is urgent. We have 80,000 people homeless today in Chicago. I mean, a lot of times in our community say, look, there are more and more homeless in the viaducts. There's more, hunger. There's more issues, right? And unfortunately, there's all this more austerity, and the austerity is a result of corporations avoiding taxes. Developers don't want to pay their fair share, and profit has become the end of everything. So we got to make sure that we talk about stability, a conscious development, right? And at the end of the day, a system that works for everyone.
¿Verdad? Algo que me gustaría que mejorara, siendo una ciudad que ha sido urbanísticamente diseñada, pensada, urbanísticamente diseñada y pensada, y la van actualizando constantemente, pienso yo que si tiene esta ciudad ese poder, que lo pudiera hacer un poco más rápido e inclusiva. Esto quiere decir involucrar otras comunidades, siendo parte de este crecimiento poderoso de esta ciudad. No solamente hoy en día, después de haber estudiado arquitectura y conservación histórica en el Art Institute, me di cada vez más cuenta que toda esa inversión, todo el enfoque está sobre el downtown de Chicago, y el resto de la ciudad está un poco abandonada, y si la ciudad se preocupa por su historia, pienso que la ciudad puede involucrar, puede hacer partícipe a otras comunidades de su historia, ¿no? Como no solamente comunidades latinas, todas alrededor.
So the city is in a bit of a bind on the financial end and also on the perception of political corruption and the impact that that has on business.
So the zoning code in Chicago is very complicated and unclear, and the zoning map in Chicago is very complicated and unclear. The combination of a complicated zoning code and a patchwork zoning map makes it very hard for a new entrepreneur to figure out where a business can start. Some entrepreneurs don't even know to check whether there's a zoning law that determines where they can start their businesses. So the problems that we see as lawyers for low-income entrepreneurs include people who signed a lease or poured money into a space that they believed was perfect for their business, only to find out later when they went to get a business license that they're not allowed to have that business in that space, or perhaps that there's an expensive, lengthy process they have to go through to be able to have the business in that space. We encounter entrepreneurs who live and want to start their businesses in neighborhoods where the aldermen have tried to downzone all of the property so that no one can start a business without going through the aldermen and getting the zoning code changed. That's a real problem for an entrepreneur who doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the experience, or just doesn't have the appetite to go through that process of getting approval from the aldermen and the neighbors and getting the law changed just to start a business. It's very expensive to pay rent or a mortgage on a property that you're not allowed to use yet, and you don't even know for sure you're going to be allowed to use.
La ciudad tiene un montón de reglas para todos, ¿no? Y ya ni se diga para negocios. Unos son más sencillos, otros más complejos. Casi todo lo tiene en inglés. Actualmente está tratando de hacer las cosas en español para no llegar a otras comunidades. Sin embargo, sus códigos, sus reglas o sus licencias, su información a veces en inglés y en español no está clara, o no me está dando una respuesta de sí o no. Entonces uno entra en un proceso en el que puede tomar tiempo, ¿verdad? A veces te dicen que sí, todo lo puedes hacer, a veces te dicen que no, o tienes que esperar para saber si sí se puede o no se puede. La ciudad en ciertos casos sí te puede dar una respuesta muy rápida, en otros casos no. Por ejemplo, tienen que revisar zoning, siempre revisan zoning para saber si un negocio lo puedes hacer o no. En mi caso, que yo abrí de consultoría, inmediatamente ahí en la ciudad me pidieron la dirección, pusieron la dirección, dijeron sí, sí puedes, y en una hora me dieron mi certificado, ¿verdad? Pero si es para comida, o si es para la carpintería, o por si es para alguien que va a utilizar productos que son químicos, yo sí quiero hacer restauración, yo sí tengo que pasar por otro proceso, lo más seguro es que no me acepten en cualquier lugar, ¿verdad? Otros casos te dicen, revise el plano de zoning. Sí, la ciudad de Chicago tiene muchos recursos que no están fáciles de consultar, ¿verdad? Si yo que estudié conservación histórica, yo hago uso de esos planos. A veces son los profesionistas que podemos hacer uso de ciertas herramientas que la ciudad provee para determinar si puedes hacer negocio en un lugar u otro. Pero para una comunidad donde vienen personas que a veces han ido a la primaria, a veces no saben leer y escribir, saben español y no pueden inglés, entonces ¿cómo pueden tener acceso a esas herramientas que les pueden dar una solución rápida y sencilla y económica? Entonces no hay esa facilidad para muchas comunidades.
From a planning point of view, I think Chicago, like many U.S. cities, adopted its zoning code after World War II when there was this idea of having everything respond to market thinking, and Chicago followed suit that way. it essentially mandates a monoculture of uses where we have housing separated from manufacturing, separated from commerce. And I don't think that's relevant today. I think when you apply that sort of market thinking, you tend to look at things as commodities and that are interchangeable and that you can pay for. And it's devoid of the sort of value system. And this is something Harvard's Michael Sandel warns against, right?
In my time working at previous firms and then starting late in design, we'd worked on several community and corridor plans, and we kept hearing the same thing over and over. You know, what do we do about our vacant storefronts? How do we support our local small businesses? What do we do about vacant land in our neighborhood? How do we create stable neighborhoods so people don't leave and they want to come back? And it didn't matter where you were in the city, you heard the same thing. So it didn't matter if you were in Lincoln Park or you were in Austin or you were in Chatham. Everyone who was concerned about keeping their neighborhood healthy, vital, knew the impact of having unique businesses there, not only to serve the neighborhood, but also keep those neighborhood residents who have the businesses, keep finding them opportunities to thrive and not move to the southwest suburbs or not move out west or not even just leave the city completely. Because we know there's been a continued population decline in certain neighborhoods in our cities on the south and the west side that hasn't been in elsewhere.
So I think there are a lot of problems with the zoning code as it's written and also the way it's enforced or executed or maintained and dealt with. A lot of people who apply for zoning changes end up getting them because there's no reason not to grant them the zoning change sometime, except that the map was just drawn wrong or redrawn wrong at some point. And so the map has been almost gerrymandered. I mean, nobody's winning an election because of this, but people are exerting influence by redrawing the map, and it affects property owners, and so property owners have to go through this process that takes a long time, is really expensive, and is sometimes subject to NIMBYism of people who don't understand what's happening, and oftentimes because they simply don't understand what's happening, that's enough for them to put their foot down on any project.
And so looking at that and coming from a background with looking at affordable housing design, I was wondering, why don't we have affordable commercial design? Like where is that? You have a commercial real estate industry that keeps wanting to have larger clients, longer terms. I understand the need and the desire to have that level of stability, but also in my own neighborhood, you would see a storefront vacant for years before finally you get a mobile store. Like, I don't see my quality of life actually improving at that point. So we had an idea, and it had been floating around in our head, like, could you do, pop-up retail? Could you do micro retail? We saw this in London, New York, San Francisco, Tokyo. Like, there are plenty of examples. I feel like half of my architecture school notes was looking at small storefronts throughout the world, and it's like, we don't have this here. And I wasn't convinced we didn't have it in Chicago. At first I was like, I'm just looking in the wrong place. I'm gonna go search for it. And so it came down to starting to search for where was this small building example. Because I knew we had minimum building sizes per the code and per zoning, but where was a small building example in Chicago? And when you look at it, it only exists as a concession stand within the realm of the park districts, or it exists as a newspaper stand. And you could actually track the areas throughout the city where newspaper stands were very common and then slowly got regulated out of existence. So you could do a map of newspaper stands were allowed, and then an alderman had an amendment to outlaw any new newspaper stands in their neighborhood, and then slowly newspaper stands were completely outlawed. And there's only a handful that exist. You hardly ever see them open. They can't upgrade their structures, because if they do, then they'll have to close because they won't meet current building code. So they exist in like a moment of stasis, just as is, until they basically fall over. So
there's this idea that forced A corner store in 4 stories is a building and use typology that's not allowed in most neighborhoods, even though it used to be, where you could have in the middle of a residential neighborhood a 4-story building at the corner and a store on the ground floor. That's essentially outlawed because we've redrawn all the maps to only allow residential inside of the main street square. And the ones that still exist can remain, but if they go out of business, nobody else can rebuild a business in that same location. It has to become a residential unit at that point. And so then the community lost an asset.
Right. So I do think that over the years, Chicago, in its regulations, has made it difficult for social entrepreneurs. It is difficult to do any of these projects as of right, so they all have headwinds and friction built in. Largely, I do think a lot of what's in the zoning code has to do with protectionism, right? Clearly, even the food trucks in Chicago are an example of this, right? Where you have small entrepreneurs held at bay, right, by the restaurant industry, right? So and protectionism, right, is always a problem unless it protects you, right? So I am more in favor of liberalizing, having less protectionism built in, allowing social entrepreneurs to proceed with their projects with less demand on their time and their scarce resources, right, to realize a new building, a new project.
Son tantos trámites que lo que hace es desmoralizar a las personas. Las desmoraliza. Y sí hay formas de ayudar en el sentido, no lo estoy dando gratis, no lo estoy haciendo, vaya, digo, se puede hacer una manera en que ambas partes ganen. Ambas partes ganen, quiero decir, la ciudad tiene gente que saca esa licencia para tener control y registro de trabajos o negocios que están relacionados con seguridad, y también las personas pueden pagar sus impuestos, pero si lo hacen de una manera más, no sé si, no creo ni que la palabra sea accesible, es que tenga una continuidad. Es decir, por ejemplo, este ejemplo de peddlers. Una de las reglas o una de las cosas que la persona que quiere abrir este negocio tiene que demostrar es que tiene la licencia con la cocina o la licencia con el share kitchen, y tiene que presentar el diseño, los planos del diseño de este carrito. Y hay cierto listado de cómo deben de ser. Entonces la gente va y hace uno y lo trae. No, pues así no es, te falta esto y aquello. Va, lo vuelven a hacer y regresa. Bueno, ¿por qué no te dicen de una vez qué es lo que debe de tener, no? O que te digan, ¿sabes qué? Hay ciertas compañías que lo saben hacer. Entonces, ¿qué hace esta persona? Va con cualquier otra persona que también va a inventarse hacer esto. Entonces, lo que se está generando, yo creo, es no hacer algo bien, incluso hasta generar otro tipo de negocios que tampoco están legalizados. Entonces, están generando, yo creo que genera otro problema en vez de una solución.
At the same time, the city has done planning in a lot of different ways, and I'll give you a couple of examples that relate and will also show kind of the change. So first, regarding daycare, I remember, and this is, I hate starting sentences that way because it just makes me sound old and out of it, but I guess maybe I am. So I remember back in the early 90s when daycare centers first wanted to come downtown. You would have thought that we were taking the whole American culture and dream and throwing it out the window. People are like, what impact is it going to have on their development? And they're going to get run over by cars, and they're going to be kidnapped, and they're going to get caught in fires in buildings downtown. We have had a couple of fires in buildings downtown, but let's face it, they're pretty far and few between. But the first hearing for a daycare center in downtown Chicago before the Zoning Board of Appeals for special use went on for about four or 5 hours, raising all these issues, the pickup and drop off, and the safety of the kids, and what about the lavatories, and all these things. Well, Now we're just like, well, where's the daycare center? You know, what's the closest daycare center to my office? And oh, there's not one in my building. Well, let me talk to my employer about that. You know, I gotta go 2 blocks for the daycare center for my kid. You know, what's wrong with this city? So daycare centers and downtown office buildings are de rigueur.
It's not about simplification. It's about understanding that there are things we don't know, or we're going to change our minds later on. And changing your mind about a zoning code only is allowed to happen every couple of decades. And that's not good enough because it doesn't allow the flexibility that we need to adapt to changing housing, households, family makeup, business types. Like cannabis was not something we thought of in 2004 when the zoning code was rewritten. So we have to think about it now, and then are we thinking about it fast enough to allow cannabis businesses to open on the timeline that they need to open to deal with the state law that's going to go into effect on January 1st?
I think the growth of small business is very important, and the city and the state and the federal government need to do everything they can to promote the growth of small businesses. Some of the statistics indicate that that's really where a tremendous amount of job growth comes from. We tend to focus on, you know, the big businesses. You know, Uber Freight's coming and they're going to bring 2,000 jobs over the next 5 years. Well, that's terrific. How many small businesses will create more than 2,000 jobs in aggregate over the next 5 years? A lot more.
In terms of Chicago improving its own agility and the agility of its social entrepreneurs and business owners, that even the zoning code has to be able to take more risks. Instead of having our policymakers make policies for problems of the past generations, I would like our policymakers to stick their necks out, right? To be free to trial an idea, right? To pilot a program in a neighborhood. To not always fall back on, okay, we'll let New York do it, we'll let LA do it, see how it goes, and then we'll adopt it. I'd like Chicago, perhaps in that way, to take more risks, to be a leader, right? If you want to see that in your citizens, why not do that as a politician, right? And I think that what it means for the citizens is that failure has to be an option, right? Just as you're an entrepreneur and you want to iterate on something until it's perfected, right? You have to be able to do that as a city and to say, hey, we're going to try this, all right? Then we're going to ask people what they think about it, and we're going to make it better, right? But we're not going to do nothing. We're not going to just rely on existing laws and regulations, ideas that were great for past economies. We're going to actually start taking risks ourselves as a city.
We're going into the culture of condominiums. You know, there is no sense of communities anymore. It's one big global thing, and from my perspective, it's so empty. All people do is drink and drink and eat, I guess. It's a different deal that's taken us into the 21st century, and there's got to be a balance. Like always, there's got to be a balance. You just can put all your eggs in one basket and forget about the other, because we might start seeing riots or whatever.
With regard to some great changes to make to the zoning ordinance, simplifying it would be very, very helpful. And a couple of ways that I think they could simplify it have not so much to do with the content of the code in terms of, you know, the minimum lot area or the floor area ratio or your setback requirements or your off-street parking requirements, but the processes that you have to go through in order to get your approvals. For example, the Zoning Board of Appeals meets once a month. It's an all-day meeting, and 85 to 90% of the cases are approved. Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have an administrative process where city staff could review your application. You could still have notice to the neighbors because you want to make sure that, you know, it's copacetic. But you wouldn't have to wait a month A lot of times you probably wouldn't even have to hire a lawyer. And you wouldn't have to sort of sit there all day and this, and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And it's just a very cumbersome system. So if the city could go through and say, what are the types of cases that commonly get approved? All right, we're going to, all of those types of cases, we're going to put into the administrative process. Schedule an appointment, you come in, you meet with the zoning administrator or another designated person, they review your application. If there's no objection from the neighbors or the aldermen or community groups, they'll approve it.
And we have to increase the amount of commercial options, the amount of educational options, the amount of residential options, amount of job options, like tenfold across our city. So the need's not going to go away anytime soon. So the more we could be forward-thinking, progressive, and open to new ideas and actually trying them out, making pathways to let these prototypes exist and be commented on and evolve, that's what will make us a better city. Because we can't just write the policy and still make it completely difficult barrier to actually achieve what was just written. So if we write that ADUs are accessible, but it's still going to cost XYZ because the building code or zoning doesn't allow it, or you have an aldermanic right to refuse it, or a community process that doesn't see the benefit of it, or no community process, then we get no closer to actually having any more affordable housing.
We think the best investment for the city is to simplify things and take the barriers down instead of creating lots of advisors who might be able to help you climb over the barrier part way.